Go.
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
Is there any sound coming through?
No tenemos.
Uh-oh.
How about now?
Oh, maybe. Actually, I think I have this thing muted.
How about now?
This. Unmute site? Yep. Yo, yeah, we got it. We're good.
Okay.
Okay, we're allowed to talk again. Thank goodness.
Great.
So, Jack, you were explaining the relayer before we had to take a brief intercession.
Absolutely. So let me just get back to sort of the top there, and we can kind of get this thing off on the right foot. So I was talking about the 4 major primitives in IBC and how they fit together to create an IBC transaction. And then I'm going to kind of talk through some common questions around game of zones, demo the relayer so that you kind of see this for yourself. And yeah, so hopefully if y'all have any questions along the way, please drop them in the chat and we're happy to answer them. So back to the 4 different IBC primitives. So there's clients, connections, channels, and packets. The most fundamental one, I think, is the client. And the client is a light client that you commit to the state of a given chain. And this allows you to validate any data that you're committing to your chain from the other chain that has the light client. And this is the fundamental piece that sort of enables IBC. So the light client development that we've done over the last 6 to 8 months that really standardized and made performant the light client that we have in Tendermint, and it was the fundamental enabler for IBC. So that client is sort of the first piece of infrastructure in IBC. On top of that, you need to build a connection. And the connection essentially authenticates one chain with another chain. And that's a 4-step handshake. And at each step, we're sort of verifying data from the other chain and ensuring that they've committed to this. And once that happens, the connection, pretty simple, and you don't really, as a user, need to think about it too much, which is kind of nice. And then once that happens, you can create a channel. And this tells you what type of data is traveling over top of it, i.e. what's the application version that you're using. The most standard one right now is ICS 20. It's the ability to move fungible tokens over top of IBC. It's got the version and ordering as well. So whether it's an ordered or unordered channel. And over top of the channel, that's when you send packets. So a packet would be, for example, one transfer from one chain to another. And the way the packet works is you start a transfer on one chain and you send a packet. And that's sort of, you can think of it as sitting in an outgoing queue on that chain. And then you have to have a message to receive the packet on the other chain, and you use the client to verify that data. Now, IBC also contains affordances for packet acknowledgements, i.e. once the packet has been received on the receiving chain, if there's some complex processing that needs to happen, maybe in the case of a more complex protocol than token transfer, you would send an acknowledgement back to the sending chain that the transaction had in fact completed successfully. And also within the protocol, there are timeout packets. So if you're trying to send a packet, and let's say you only want that packet to be available to be sent for 50 blocks, after 50 blocks, the packet would time out, and you would send the timeout message to the other chain to say that that was no longer a valid packet to send. So with that in mind, those are the 4 primitives of IBC. This morning, we talked quite a bit about game of zones scoring, and the first round is basically just keeping these clients updated and ensuring that you can keep a connection alive between 2 chains. Now, why do the clients need to be updated? Well, one reason the clients need to be updated is if you've included new data in another chain, you might need to update your client to prove that data on your chain. So that's sort of like as you're creating these channels, connections, and sending packets, you're constantly updating these clients. And you're ensuring that you have the latest headers so that you can verify the data coming from those chains. But another reason you might need to update clients is if a client goes a long period of time without an update, and by long period, I mean any time that's longer than the unbonding period, you can no longer trust the data. You can no longer trust that client to accurately verify data. So once the client goes past the unbonding period, or the trusting period is what we call it within IBC, that client's no longer valid, and you have to create a new one and then create all these primitives again in order to send packets. So the first stage of Game of Zones, we will be basically just ensuring that users can keep one of these connections alive and using the relayer to update those clients.
We are throwing a little bit of a obstacle course in the way by making the trust period extremely short.
Yeah.
So typically when you're operating, you're going to be operating an IBC relay. When you care about an IBC connection on a blockchain on mainnet, like the extent to which you have to care on mainnet is, someone needs to send a packet once every 3 weeks. On Game of Zones sort of phase 1, it's going to be like, you better have a packet sent every 90 minutes, otherwise.
Yeah, and the relayer does allow you to do these update clients fairly seamlessly, but it's up to you to kind of figure out how you want to script that or run it otherwise to keep your connection alive. And this is really going to help test the stability of running a bunch of chains all connected to each other, all with connections kept alive for a while. We have done quite a bit of work on the recent IBC testnets, which we're going to be relaunching next week, to ensure that this piece of it, and in fact all the pieces of IBC, do work pretty seamlessly. And in the past testnets, we have not had any issues with this. So looking forward to that. What were some of those other questions that we ran into, Jessy?
One of the questions we specifically had was we had one about how we're going to measure uptime.
Oh, yeah.
Had another question basically about where to get started and where a team that's starting to ramp up on Game of Zones should look in the documentation and what they should get.
Yep, absolutely. So I think the answer to all of these questions is sort of rooted in these 4 different primitives of IBC. And how are we measuring uptime is a great question. And there's a native way within IBC that we can do this. So what we were just talking about with these update client messages and ensuring that these clients are updated, each of those client updates has a height associated with it. And that update happens at a certain height on the receiving chain as well. So there's 2 different heights associated with that. And we can easily use those amount of heights to figure out how long the connection has been kept alive for and whether or not the client's been updated in the right amount of time. So that's how we measure uptime. As for teams who are looking to get started with IBC, I do think the easiest way to get started with it is to go look at the relayer repo and try the demo, and then figure out which piece you need more information about and go do some further reading. So I'm going to go ahead and drop this link in the chat. And it's just github.com/inclusioninc/relayer. And on the README, there's a very basic walkthrough of how to do it. There's a little bit more information in the documentation. And once you have done that, then your next step is probably going to be to go to the Cosmos ICS repository and read the interchain standards, which are the much more technical documentation on how the relayer works. But for most users, all you're going to need to do is kind of look through the relayer, understand how the transactions are being run, understand how you create these linkages between these chains, and understand how you send data. Obviously, if you're doing custom application development, this is going to be pretty crucial too, and the relayer will easily work for your use case. But hopefully that's a really good place for folks to get started.
Yeah, I think also this ties nicely into scoring and how we plan on thinking about scoring and measuring scoring a bit. In some of our conversations that we've had recently, we've talked about essentially how to instrument the relayer, and if we can instrument the relayer in specific ways so that we're able to measure liveness and some of the other important parts of the challenge. Zaki, this is me throwing a softball at you. Do you want to talk a little bit about what we're looking for in each stage and how the stages build on one another?
So our principal tools for observability are the fact that we're building a hub. And the hub is going to make sort of the visibility into this entire network of blockchains that we're standing up for Game of Zones, sort of a tractable problem. That we're also going to probably ask, we're going to ask every participant to also give us sort of an open RPC port to a full node, so we're able to instrument both sides of the connection. But basically, what the central question is in the first phase of zones is there a connection to the chain ID you gave us and to the blockchain you gave us, and is there is that active when we got started? And the second piece is there going to be is that blockchain that you started out with going to is there going to be a live connection for the entire game zone? So, there'll be like a 5-day period. We'll be querying every block, and the question will be, on what block did the connection get instantiated, and then did that connection ever become did the trust period expire at any point along the way? And like kind of with the goal towards sort of scoring is essentially, can you make that number of basically blocks in which your connection was live and as large as possible. And honestly, I'm expecting that a good chunk of participants are going to clear that bar. Hopefully, everybody's going to get across the finish line with having their connection been live for the entire period. I don't expect it to be overwhelmingly difficult. Though how to automate the relayer so it keeps connections alive while you are sleeping is a problem that we are throwing to our participants for phase 1, and everybody gets to build their own solution to that.
Yeah, and looking forward to that.
Another thing to add on to scoring, we've had some questions about what we're going to do with the prize distribution. I've had now half of a glass of champagne, so the exact numbers are not fresh to my mind, but our intention is to basically take that prize pool of 100,000 atoms and to split it in two. The first 50% of the atom will be given to people who win the weekly challenges and the cumulative challenges that we've listed in the scope for the competition. If you're not familiar with that, you can check that out on our site, which we can also link here. And then the other half—
I'll drop a link there, Jessy. I'll drop a link there.
Perfect, thank you. The other half of the atom, we essentially want to make sure is there to reward people who successfully make it through at least the first week of competition. One thing that we are very aware of is we're playing with essentially, experimental code. Lots of different facets of the code haven't been automated or, fleshed out as much as we'd like them to be production ready just yet. But in this particular case, similar to what we did with Game of Stakes, too many games going on here, we will be making sure that there is a participant distribution and there's also a pool for winners. Guys, did I miss any details on that?
Nope.
Great. Zaki, there was another thing that's been asked a few times, and that's about whether, validators should be thinking about what services or what value that IBC can add to their business. I know you talked about that a little bit earlier. But can you revisit it?
Sorry. Let me kill the
Well, Zaki's going to kill the phones.
So the question was about validator business models and why become a relayer?
Yeah, like what different things can we do with IBC that are a value add for validators? I mean, at the moment, we have a lot of validators who are validating on different proof of stake networks.
Yeah.
But stake I actually can't talk. But there is so much that is new and novel and hasn't been thought through in the world of IBC. So,
So
I mean, this is one of the pieces I'm most excited about. Zaki, please take it away.
Yeah, let's hop in here. So what we anticipate, the vision of IBC is that IBC is sort of unlocks an opportunity for validators to become much more active participants in the Cosmos network. They get to deploy new blockchains and new services and the reason why people might be willing to send real money over an IBC connection is because that validator is out there, not only validating on the hub, but saying, I'm willing to stand behind this blockchain and you can trust your money to this blockchain. There's fundamental new opportunities for blockchains, for validators around service discovery, visibility, and just like operating this piece of relayer infrastructure for the blockchains that they care about to sort of bring new blockchains and into the Cosmos network and universe. So I think validators in general should be pretty excited about IBC as kind of a business model enabler. In many ways, like the Cosmos testnets started so many companies down the journey of, building staking as a service, other kinds of businesses around, this staking economy that got built. There's a hope and there's a vision that like IBC is sort of unlocking a whole new set of economics to play with.
Yeah, and I think to your point, things like cross-chain validation and other really exciting use cases in this cross-chain world provide a number of opportunities for validators. So it's good stuff.
To go back to the question pool really quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Earlier that asked what we would do in case of a halt of the testnet that we're running Game of Zones on.
This is an excellent question.
We've talked about this a couple of times, but we could probably walk through how we're thinking about, when we've messed up and it's our fault that the code breaks or the competition breaks, and when, something's going to impact scoring and someone's ability to, get their full prize distribution.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one thing that's important before we dive too deeply into this discussion is to talk about liveness in the IBC testnet.
Yeah.
Now, in all of the prior Cosmos testnets and in every Cosmos testnet up until now and in all these blockchain testnets, liveness is defined by the chain continuing to produce blocks. And that's great. They also exist in these networks where all of the validators know where to find each other and they're constantly gossiping information between them. And if at any time that peer-to-peer network goes down or the network can't advance, then liveness is violated. IBC is very different. It's much more like the open internet. And it's a protocol that's designed to look and function a lot like TCP. So with that in mind, how can we think of the internet having liveness when there's a huge chunk of the sites that no one really knows how to access? Like, if those sites aren't live, is the internet not live? IBC is much the same. So are we talking about a liveness issue affecting individual chains? Or are we talking about a liveness issue affecting IBC connectivity as a whole? There's a lot of different ways to look at this. But basically, one of the major purposes of this whole competition is to help us find bugs and issues within the software. So if you as a user do find something that takes down your chain and it's a bug in IBC, we might even have a bounty for you because you might help us find a critical issue that's going to help save us time on mainnet, and it's going to help prevent a huge network crash once we get this thing live. So
I'm legally required to remind people that if they find a security bug during the competition, part of our scope and part of what we expect from our community is that flaws in the code won't be exploited to win. If you find a bug and you report it to us, which we've outlined in our challenge scope, we'll make sure that when IBC is added to the bug bounty program, you get adequately rewarded.
Yeah. And it won't, sorry, Jessy.
It's okay. It's a legal requirement. I'm not kidding.
No, fair enough. And it won't affect your ability to get prizes or otherwise win.
Yep.
Oh, somebody asked, can I register with super abnormal metadata designed to disrupt clients and so on? Please, please, please try
Yes,
this.
please.
Absolutely. Adversarial metadata extremely encouraged. Hope that answers your question. A bunch of zeros, 222. Neon ZT7, how will validators be rewarded for relaying a blockchain? What's the mechanism for it? Thanks. This is a great question that I get quite a bit more when I'm talking about validators, and I think it's just something that's kind of important to address. Within blockchains, and especially in the proof of stake ecosystem, we've talked quite a bit about incentivizing all of the different network participants to ensure that they're incentivized to continue to perform their roles. In the version 1.0 of the IBC spec, we are not incentivizing relayers. We believe that validators have a sufficient incentive to run these relayers. And also, in addition, if validators don't, you can build lightweight relayers in all kinds of languages, and you could even easily run one in the browser. All you need is a light client and then the ability to submit transactions to both chains. So because this role is so lightweight and it's essentially just passing messages, we thought that incentivizing this role within the protocol at the first stage would have been a little overkill and would have made the protocol abnormally complicated. So we chose to not incentivize relayers. But as I mentioned, I do think validators are adequately incentivized to perform this role. Zaki, do you have any additional thoughts on relayer incentivization?
So my general thinking on relayer incentivization is, again, to like sort of follow the model of the internet. Internet packet routing didn't come with an incentive layer. And maybe that was a mistake. And maybe if we had cryptocurrencies back then, we could have had, but incentives sort of got, got sort of glued on a higher layer of the system, and that has worked well enough to build a global internet. So we are operating on a system that does have some native notion of money, but I think that we probably need a lot more feedback around real world use cases before we have a clear understanding of whether or not there needs to be in protocol economic incentives, or whether or not it's sufficient for this to operate on, for the incentives to operate outside of the protocol.
Yeah, I think this idea that we are not going to know exactly what the use cases on IBC are, and there's a lot of things that are going to develop that we can't understand, I think is an important lesson that I've kind of taken from the history of computing and the internet, is that when there are these big new advances and when there are these things that enable fundamentally new interaction models and new development models, like it's really, really hard to predict what's going to happen. And I think IVC is very much that way. Ooh. All right.
Another question from earlier.
Yeah.
Earlier we were asked if someone could compete both as an individual and as part of a team.
That's a great one.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that it's going to the only phase of the system of the network where I think scoring is going to be really challenging is having people who are kind of dual situated on a team and as an individual might pose some challenges for how I was planning to score phase 3 of Game of Zones.
Yeah, I think for us though, like it's different than Game of Stakes when we wanted to make it a little harder for someone to pull off a Sybil attack and just sign up for as many teams as they wanted. And in this case, we can figure out what the math looks like on the back end and make sure that for the people who are impacted, we share that information well before we work on the actual prize distribution. But in this particular challenge, I don't know, why not? It seems like you could probably get up to some fun during week 3 if you have both your own individual zone and you have a group of friends that you're, planning some craziness on the sly.
In general, if we ask people to show their work for how they've kicked ass on the deception/security model challenges, we'll be fine with people being in multiple teams.
Yeah, for the vast majority of the competition, we also want to make sure that it's very clear. We want to make sure people understand they will be able, as often as we can make possible, to check out their performance in the competition and what their participation looks like. We've been doing some really fun work on the dashboard front so that people can track how they are performing against other teams, against their friends, against themselves on another team, whatever. But we're very committed to making sure that people understand where they are. And the one part it does get tricky is going to be that third phase, where some of the things that people pull off might be done in a way that we haven't dreamed up the detection for yet. So the third week, maybe you get a JSON table with a bunch of numbers on it, but we'll give you whatever we're able to figure out how to display and how to share and how to update on a regular basis.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to look at it, Jessy.
Is there anything else important that we covered in the morning chat?
I'm looking at my notes and I'm going through email and I don't see anything that we've missed. So I'm not sure if this is like our freestyle time where we just tell everybody to grab a drink and we can start telling war stories or planning war stories for Game of Zones. But I think we're probably nearing the end of our time.
Yeah, if there are any last questions in the chat, we'd love to hear from everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I'm really looking forward to, worker and a dashboard to show GOZ status. Oh, Harriet, one of the things that came up earlier was there are a few community members who have built dashboards so far, and one is live, and you can kind of take a peek at it here. It's at goz.p2p.org. These are a little bit more stylized, and I think less designed to sort of show these sort of horse race metrics, but pretty cool. That team did a great job. I do know that there's at least one other dashboard under development, but what we're developing is definitely more on sort of the forensic side in ensuring that we can have accurate stats from all of the chains for this competition.
And for some teams, like they are excited about Game of Zones, but in lieu of setting up their own team, they've decided to work on dashboards and network visualizations. If there's something that your team happens to come up with that's amazing or fun or useful, we got some incredible tools from Game of Stakes when we ran that, and it would be really awesome to see more contributions to monitoring the network and, getting a general idea of what a good read on network hygiene is, just from the observability standpoint.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if anyone has any ideas or statistics, please bring those to us, and we're happy to sort of expose those in whatever way we can. Also, Harriet, we're looking forward to seeing y'all in the competition as well. The Iris team is building a visualizer as well, so looking forward to seeing that. Yes, absolutely. And Harriet, if there's anything I can do to help there, please drop me a line.
One of the biggest things that we're going to try to do with the folks that are running visualizers is try and help them get RPC endpoints for all of the participants.
Yeah, we'll definitely be collecting RPC endpoints so that we are able to observe the competition. Otherwise, we're basically in the dark. We're stuck in a hidden service discovery problem.
Yep.
So what we can do, especially for people who might be building a network visualization or something similar, we are happy to make that data available so that we're not the only people who, have visibility into competition performance.
So anyone can relay any packet to answer the question on Twitch. Is there an auth for who can relay, or is it open to all INTXs anyways? Basically, in IBC 1.0, relaying is open to anyone who can read the source blockchain and write to the destination blockchain. So basically, if you have RPC on both blockchains, you can relay. There's certainly been discussion of IBC-like protocols where there's some constraint on this, where you're like, this packet specifies that only a certain validator can or a certain relayer can relay, and that might be nice in the way it might enable some economic incentivization schemes and stuff like that. But in the first version, it's just an untrusted relayer that is open to anyone. And basically anyone who can read a blockchain can relay these packets. And the IBC protocol enforces at most once or semantics, so that a packet, even if multiple people are trying to relay it, it only gets delivered once.
Yeah, I would really love to see some adversarial relay behavior, but I don't know if anyone can produce that. So yes.
It's a little complicated to both build the relayer and then figure out how to game your relayer to do adversarial things. So
this is true, Jesse. I'm thinking way too happy path these days.
It's always fun to hand over something you've created and then see, what the world does with it. So
yeah. Yeah, well, one thing that Relayer does really well is send automated transactions to large numbers of Cosmos chains. So who knows who could get up to what with that?
Wait, hold on. What happened to your demo? Where is the demo?
Here. Well, I can pull it out right now. I can.
I feel like, Jack, you've been building this. You've been baking this for us for a while.
Fair enough.
Show us how it works.
Let's do it.
Yes. IBC can absolutely support limited functionality on private blockchains. What protocols you support, ICS-20, et cetera, are entirely up to the source chains. So yes, absolutely.
I can see myself in multiple places on my own screen. This is a little trippy.
All right, so maybe we'll just minimize this then. Can you guys still see me?
Yep.
I think I also saw what you're ordering for dinner. Tell me about that later.
Yeah, maybe that needs to close too. Okay, text editor in the background, great. This is excellent. All right, so this is the repo that I dropped in the chat a little bit earlier. It's github.com/occlusioninc/relayer. And you can kind of see what that looks like here. This link is also on the Game of Zones website and a number of other places as well. So if you have any trouble finding it, please just reach out.
We're also going to be writing a blog post that mentions all the things that we've talked about and the links that we've dropped. So we'll hit you over the head with the information you need.
Absolutely. And if you take a peek at the README, you can kind of see exactly step-by-step what I'm doing here. I'm going to run through it a bit. And if I skip anything, there's really detailed documentation right here. So the first thing you're going to need to do is spin up a couple of chains in order to run against. And this two-chain script that's at the root of the repo creates two different instances of Gaia and lets them run. And if you take a peek in the data directory here, you can see their logs. Data, IBC 0.log. You can see it creating blocks. So great. The next thing we need to do is start configuring the relayer. Let me remove my old relayer configuration. And you can do that with the binary. So we're going to go ahead and install the relayer first. And the relayer is just a simple Go binary, easy to cross-compile, easy to build on pretty much any architecture. You shouldn't have any issues. The name of the command line tool is RLY, and I've really tried to give it pretty robust help text here so that you can easily figure out how to sort of do all these different pieces here. So there's a number of commands around configuration, and the first thing we're going to do is initialize the config. Now, let's just take a peek at the empty config file so that you can see as we add some things to it. And the standard configuration is at .relayer config config.yaml. You can see we have some global config, things like timeout and the number of light client headers we're going to keep in the cache, but we're missing some chains, and this is configuration that includes things like RPC endpoint and denominations, address prefixes, and then paths, which contain the names of the clients, connections, and channels that you want to relay over between these two chains. So I have some pre-canned configuration stored in the relayer directory specifically for this two-chain script, and I'm going to go ahead and use that and then show you what the config looks like with a little bit more information in it. Enter, no, this is configs. Right, so you can see that we added a couple of chains and we also added a path. And let's take a peek at that relayer configuration now. So you can see here the configuration that we need for the chains. We do need a key, so the relayer manages keys locally. Right now it's fairly insecure, which will be fine for game of stakes, but we will be adding more secure key management methodologies here. But obviously, if you're keeping any keys online, please try to keep as few funds in there as possible and just refill them from an offline key. So for the chains, you need the chain ID, the RPC address, the account prefix, and then some information about how much we're going to pay for gas, what the default denom is, and this trusting period here. During the first phase of IBC, you're going to see this trusting period be something like 90 minutes, as we were talking about. So that's where that comes into play. And then the path contains the different IBC primitive names that we want to relay between. As a user, the ones that you're going to come into contact with most frequently are the chain ID and the port. And you can kind of think about this like a domain name and a port in TCP/IP. So if we look at our config chains list and we list them, you can see here that we don't have keys, coins, or light clients for these chains. So let's go ahead and fix that. We spun up these chains from the Gaia testnet command. So there are some keys locally that we're going to go ahead and just grab. And now you should see that we have keys with coins in them. The last thing that we need to do to relay is initialize the light client. So this will pull the latest header from each of the chains and use it to initialize the light client database locally, which we will then use to verify all data coming back from queries.
And I think during the competition, we're going to have the distribution set up in a pretty straightforward way, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously everyone's kind of running their own zone, so you can do distribution on your own chain however you'd like. We do have a number of relayers that folks can run, faucets that folks can run if they want to give out tokens to their own chain. Let's say you're running a custom chain and you want to show off your application. This is a great opportunity to showcase that. That's your own business, but on the hub, as part of the application for Game of Zones, you do need to submit a Cosmos address. We will be provisioning each of those Cosmos addresses with some hub tokens so that you at least have one other chain that you can be a counterparty with. Yeah. So we see that we have all of the key, balance, light client, and path all configured, so we're ready to relay. Let's take a look at our paths. And we can see that we have that one demo path and we're missing clients, connections, and channels in order to transfer. So the command to do that is relay tx link demo. So we're going to use this demo chain here. And then I'm going to make the timeout a little bit shorter so this runs quickly. And this command creates all three of those first primitives for you so that you can start sending packets very quickly. There's a lot of error handling here. This works over much larger networks. It works on larger timeouts and should fairly gracefully recover from errors. I'm looking forward to people bringing me some novel errors that it can't recover from. So, great. So now we can see that we've created all of those. and we're ready to send packets. The relayer has a few different modes for sending transactions, and I'm going to show you those. So the most simple one is you send the transaction on one chain, and you immediately just go ahead and send the associated transaction on the other chain. And that's kind of a hard-coded transfer. I'm going to go ahead and show that first. And that's under Relay TX Transfer. You can see that this accepts a bunch of arguments. I'm going to go ahead and talk through those. So we're going to go send from IBC0 to IBC1. We're going to send 10,000 in 0 tokens. That's some tokens that are on IBC1. Those tokens do come from IBC1, so from IBC0. So IBC0 is the source there. And the address we're sending to, we're just going to send to the relayer address on IBC1. Right. Oh, it's in 0 token. Excellent validation here. All right, so we see those two transactions sent. The first one was a transfer on IBC0, and then we're updating the client on IBC1 so that we can prove that we sent the transfer on IBC0. And if we look at the balance on IBC1, we will relay Q balance. We can see that those transfer tokens are there. Very cool. And then to send them back, right. And they both have all of their tokens back. You will notice that this stake amount has been decreasing. It's because we're paying fees on both chains. So we're just slowly paying a little bit of stake for fees. And then the other way, which is sort of the more canonical way to run the relayer, is that the relayer is listening for transactions from both chains and then relaying them as they come along. In this way, that the user interaction is you just have to send your transfer on the originating chain, and then everything else kind of happens behind the scenes for you. So I'm going to go ahead and queue up a couple of transactions and then send one streaming transaction. Thanks for send. So this is just the first part of this transaction here, this message transfer. We're going to go from IBC0 to IBC1. 0 token, true. All right, we have sent 2 of those to IBC0, and we're going to go ahead and send 2 of those to IBC1. And if we query the, what are we calling, unrelayed, if we query the unrelayed transactions, we can see that we have 2 on each chain. So I'm going to go over here in this other window and run this command called relayer start. And this starts the relayer listening to both IBC0 and IBC1. And it's looking at this particular demo link that we created. And it's going to forward any packets over that. And here at the beginning, you're going to see it relay the 2 existing packets, and then it's just listening for events.
Nice.
So if we query the balance on IBC0, we'll see that we sent over those transfer tokens. And if we query the balance on IBC1, we'll also see the same thing. And now, let's say we send from IBC1 to IBC0. We're just going to send the first transaction, but we're going to see those tokens show up on IBC0 because the relayer completed the rest of it for us. So the canonical mode here that you're supposed to run this thing in is this relayer start. And as a validator, this is easily a service that you can provide to your users where you can say, if you want to send any packets off chain, we can go ahead and relay them for you. Here are the ports and channels that we're relaying over. The relayer also has some very nice hooks to allow users to, oh goodness, here. How do I? So there it is. There's my stop sharing button. The relayer also has some very nice hooks to allow users to whitelist or blacklist different addresses, and we're going to add a lot of ability there after the Game of Zones and prior to launch. So that's how the relayer works.
So the main way to think about liveness in phase 1 of Game of Zones is you need to run a relayer. You need to run a zone. So you have to start a blockchain. The blockchain has to stay running, and the relayer has to send one packet every 90 minutes successfully. And you have to do that for several days. That is the simplified what is phase 1 of Game of Zones. And thank you for the demo, Jack.
Yeah, absolutely. Someone was asking a quick question about the light clients in the relayer. I have this doc on the relayer configuration, which also talks about the on-disk footprint of the relayer, and it includes the light clients there. And hopefully that makes that make a little bit more sense.
Harriet also had a question about sort of maintaining liveness on the test nets and how difficult it's been. And I think what we're expecting is for, that's mostly because of breaking changes, I believe, sort of rolling out. And we're expecting that to calm down towards the beginning of next
Yeah.
Yes.
I forgot to mention this earlier, but one thing that we've been thinking about, we're starting Game of Zones on Friday, May 1st. Usually that would be the day when everybody runs out and gets to do lots of amazing protesting, but we're all trapped in the house. We basically step back and realize sometimes when we try to set up a test net, it falls over. Coordination can be difficult. So from May 1st to May 3rd, we're really going to be making sure that we've gotten everything stood up and functional and working. And the first phase will actually start the Monday after we launch. So that will also give people a little bit more time to be comfortable. If we have a bug on our end that came from the core development team and it makes everything fall over, during Game of Stakes, we had this happen once or twice and we figured it out. But definitely we understand that these test nets are not the same as running, your good old Cosmos test net from a year ago. And if something bad happens, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Harriet, to your question about liveness as well, and as Jesse was saying, that is due to breaking changes. We're going to have tagged releases. We have seen a lot of stability around the core elements of this software. The clients, connections, and channels piece of it is working great. I hate saying this, but I really don't anticipate any issues with liveness, especially in the first phase. So
Mark, this is when we blame him.
Yeah,
when something goes wrong. This is when we come back to get you.
Come get me if that goes wrong. But anyway, let's keep the fingers crossed on that one.
You also did just write a blog post about how the IBC test nets are a bit different than other test nets.
Yeah, absolutely.
One important thing that people competing can do as part of their preparedness for the competition is to join the test net that we're standing up again next Monday. It will be one of the earlier, it'll be one version before the release candidate for Game of Zones. So
yeah, I think so.
Great to get ready and understand the software before we get to that final competition version.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that we need to do right at the beginning of Game of Zones during that period where we're going to ask everyone to spin up their machines, but not really start the competition fully. Everyone needs to share RPC endpoints with everyone else, and we will have a central GitHub repository to do that. You can see an example of how to share connections in the Relayer repo, but ensuring that everyone has connections to the chain and we have connections to everyone else, I do think is extremely important, especially during that first stage. So,
yeah.
Awesome.
Cool.
Anything else that we need to cover, Jesse?
I'm going to check my channels one more time just to make sure that we don't have any other questions that have snuck through. But I think that overall we've covered pretty much everything. One more, and then I can give the all clear.
All right. Well, thank you all for being a very resilient audience this evening.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Appreciate that.
For putting up with us not understanding how audio works on the internet. But
I'm still confused what went wrong, but we'll find out.
We'll do a postmortem because that's what you're supposed to do when things go wrong. But yeah, we're looking forward so much to kicking off Game of Zones. And if you have questions, if you want to learn a little bit more about what we talked about today or get prepared for the competition, we have a ton of blog posts and a ton more information coming up. And we're really hoping that this one is a lot of fun, but also a ton of learning about how to stand up IBC and to make some pretty cool magic happen.
Well said.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
All right, killing the live stream.